Okay, I see people still coming in. Welcome to the new normal. I'm Brian Morrissey. There might be some noise in the background. I'm in the midst of moving, so a lot of stuff is going on here. Before we get started with the show, just want to, as always, give a plug to our Digiday Plus membership program. You should all be members if you're not now, because you get unlimited access to all of our amazing stories that our amazing newsroom creates every day. We also have exclusive content. I just did a column today, I think that you should all read, but you can only read if you're a member. We also do premium research. We have a research panel of, I think, about 5,000 industry executives. So we do unique research, and we have events. Yes, these are not in person anymore, but we do have Digiday Plus talks. They're how-to guides about how to navigate the different challenges that come in this time. And we do reports and guides, third-party cookie. There's lots of stuff. So please do join. This helps support our work. It's critically important at this time. And for you, we have a discount, a 20% discount. We don't do the 50% discount stuff. This is the highest possible discount you can get. Use the code TNN at checkout. You get 20% off. It's worth it, promise. So this week, I want to bring in Coltrane Curtis. Coltrane and I know a bunch of people in common, but I want to have you on first to get the background on like Team Epiphany, but we're at obviously a very interesting and fraught moment right now, and we've got a lot of brands scrambling to try to reconnect and to be relevant in a culture that is shifting every day. And it's long overdue. But Coltrane, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. I'm glad my signal's working where I am. So I'm blessed. We've been blessed.
So we're actually we live around each other in Brooklyn, and yet I don't think you're there right now.
No, I'm not.
That's a part I haven't been to.
Yeah, if this is my Brooklyn view, my bag is way different than everybody else's, and trust, it's not. So this is Connecticut. I'm in Connecticut. Okay. I got away from
You're in Connecticut. Wow. Okay, and I'm on my way to Miami. So great. A little counterintuitive, I know, but we'll do a different episode.
We'll deal with that.
So give us the background. You've had a very varied background because look, the agency business that you're in now I want to get to, but like I think the background of people before they get to the agency is important.
Yeah, so totally. Yeah, I mean, I think, you're a sum of your life's experiences, right? And I think that helps create or light the path to what you are going to do or become. And, being a dad of a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old, and, my dad was my biggest mentor. He had an agency for 25 years, started it in our attic in our brownstone on Monroe Street in Bed-Stuy, worked his way up to, an office above Dean and DeLuca's on Broadway, not there anymore, but that's where his office was. And then when we moved to Montclair, New Jersey, he had 2, but, I like to say, I'm a marketer. That's what my dad was. That's how I was trained. I always like to say, if Jordan's kids can't hit free throws, shame on them. I can hit free throws. Never could dunk, but had a wicked jumper. But yeah, I mean, I'm a kid, grew up in Brooklyn, public school, then went to private school. My parents got a little bit of money, went to Berkeley Carroll, went there 7, 8, and 9, and then graduated from there, went to Montclair High School. And then from there, played basketball, but really loved photography. My dad gave me my first F1, A1, AE1. I was the kid with the backpack and a Zero Halliburton full of Mets flashes and, lenses and taking pictures for the yearbook and newspaper. And won a scholarship from the NAACP, used that scholarship money to go to Morehouse, where I got a degree after 5.5 years in marketing. So I enjoyed my matriculation through Morehouse. I think the word matriculation, I think, was born at Morehouse. So if anybody's out there from Morehouse, you'd appreciate that nod. But I also majored in Atlanta, majored in culture, majored in what was going on, and having a camera in one hand and access to Atlanta in the other, I got the opportunity to really document that whole scene and, meet, some of the future musical and cultural icons of the day, from, all the Goody Mob kids and Dre and boys from Cast and, my guys there. And then I worked at Ralph Lauren. I worked at Lenox Mall, love Lenox, love Ralph, got a chance to meet Ralph, moved back to New York, worked at the Low Store, got an opportunity to meet a guy named Mark Milakovsky when I was living in New Jersey. Mark Milikowski actually turned out to be Mark Echo. I was one of the younger guys, and that's kind of like where I got the opportunity to like fail up. Became the VP of marketing, I think, when I was like 25 or 26.
At Echo. By the way, that rebranding was a good move by him.
Yeah, Mark is one of the one of the most influential peoples in my life. He was a genius, and still.
Were you there when Complex started then?
So I think what most people, so I transitioned from Echo to Complex, where I was an editor at Extra Large. Most people don't remember the beginnings of where Complex was, but Complex was basically, at Echo, we had a collaboration with the NFL and Target called Physical Science. We had to create a magalog to actually sell those products through at Target. And so it actually became part magazine, part catalog. And that editorial team that we put together to support that really cool, that didn't sell collaboration became actually Complex. And I became the editor at Extra Large while Ben White was the editor at large. Ben went to MTV. He took me with him. I hosted House of Style. I hosted the red carpet for the TRL Awards, the VMAs, the movie awards from a style perspective. And from there, I really got the opportunity of really understanding what was going to carve out my path in life, which was really understanding, one, getting just tired of talking to people and celebrities on carpet about what they had on, knowing that they didn't know, they didn't care. And who I really wanted to be talking to was the people standing behind the celebrity. And those people were tastemakers at the time. Those people tend to be stylists, editors, writers, those type of things. And that actually started to develop what Team Epiphany was, which was really looking at influence and really looking behind the celebrity at the people who created it. And so in 2004, I started this agency. After we won a piece of business, I was consulting for a company, MFP, Margiotta's Fertitta and Partners. We co-pitched lugs. Crazy. Like I went from Echo to lugs. Like that's how life works. And we won this piece of business. I never really negotiated compensation. And then when we won it, the compensation was office space. And so what I was able to do was barter office space from them, be able to bring in my community of creatives, give them an office space because trying to get an office in New York was just, impossible. And
that's pre-WeWork, right?
Yeah. And that was influencer marketing. So for us, it was really more about how do we harness the power that creates celebrity to work for brands. And that was the differentiation point, I think, for us and any other agency.
But what's interesting is you're talking about what we call influencer marketing now.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And it's gone in a very strange direction. As you know, like we both live in Dumbo, and like I went up to a rooftop and there was an influencer doing like a photo shoot with the bridge in the background. So it's become a different sort of thing. But explain, because you had like one foot in the marketing world and one foot in the world of the culture. I have to use air quotes.
Another word that we're going to have to unpack too.
Yeah. So explain what you saw with. I mean, we've got a slide here we can call up about influence, because I mean, you're basically about connecting brands with the people who are influential in creating the culture all around us.
Totally. I mean, when you really think about it, when my dad, told me this, I wanted to create an agency, he was like, what's your differentiation point? And, it had to be something that we can own. I think at that particular point in time, everybody was trying to be a celebrities plus one, right? I never really wanted to be on the coattails and, be a plus one of anyone. And what we really knew was that these celebrity personas were created by a team of people. And that was what kind of created TE, where it was like, if we can have access to that network that can create celebrity, what if we pluck that celebrity out and inserted a brand? What are some of the amazing things that we can do, right? The first thing is that the celebrity is probably going to come along because his trusted team is actually working on something. And so the celebrity becomes more manageable, more cost effective. And then the network, who normally doesn't get the accolades, gets an opportunity to really shine and show why they're so brilliant. Our philosophy is from an influencer purist perspective, where, I think over time, influence has now become media, right? It's only defined by social metrics and following. And for us, some of the most influential people aren't on social and some of the most influential people don't care about a follower count, right? They care about who's following them, what are they pushing out, how are people engaging with their content. The other thing is that, the big thing about influencer marketing and influence, it's really an age-old secret. Like, one of me and my dad's favorite books is Positioning, right? And when you really think about influence, most people talk about activating the individual, not the community. And the reality is, the secret to success is activating the community, but most people cannot do it because, one, they can't employ a play-to-play model for everyone, only one person. And then two, they're activating community that they don't even belong to. So it's kind of like, it's kind of like talking about what's going on in the club and you outside, right? Like, and so when you really
Not
think
even
about
outside,
it,
maybe not even in the near.
yeah, it's like you wasn't even on the line, fam. And so, but now what you get is, these overnight, celebs or influencers, we just know that we would just never hire a professional influencer. Like, what are you actually influencing? Like, what are you a master of, right? And so what we've also found is that activating influencers really works well when you activate their second passion, because most people are more passionate about the things that they're not famous for. And if you have that personal connection with that individual and you know how to unlock that passion, that's where the great work starts to happen. But you actually have to be connected to it to activate it. It's a novel concept. It's a real concept. And if if you subscribe to it, it would literally render what most PR agencies or whoever's getting these influencer budgets, it would render them incapable of doing their job, because the only reason why they can is because brands are paying them to do it. And now what's starting to happen is, like, we're seeing through it, and here we are.
Let me ask you a question, because I'm sure a lot of like marketers ask you this, and I know it's like broad, but I'll ask it anyway. Is what are the common mistakes you see for marketers? Let's say they totally want to authentically be able to be culturally relevant.
Mm-hmm.
What are the common mistakes that you see them making when they go to like a typical agency, say, to activate this?
Yeah, so I think, first, I don't think many agencies are good, right? I think, they go to the agency who's probably not that good to begin with. And then what they do is they tell them exactly how they want to get to their goal. What brands should we really be doing is working with people who are capable, identifying goal, and then allowing the agency to come back with multiple ways to reach that goal.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times our hands are tied because of, the way in which brands want to activate or utilize influence. So for us, for the sharpest tool in your toolbox will be influencer marketing. It's an age-old word of mouth. It's created by trust. And the thing about it is, most brands and most agencies only use influencers to amplify.
Yeah.
The reason why
they use it as media, like we said before, they use it as media.
Yeah,
right?
and so the beauty of it is when you can actually work with that influencer across your entire process to help hone your strategy, to help if you're producing events, to help maybe sometimes figure out a vendor to use locally. Like I always use an example of, a lot of times we do things in Houston when the world was round, or when we can actually do things, right? And one of our OGs in Houston is Bun B, right? And we would send Bun seating packages. He would post it, engage with the product. That's cool. But when I need a touchdown in Houston and I need to figure out a barbecue caterer that I can trust for a 250 person event that can handle their permitting and everything, like, I can go to Bun. So the same person I can use to activate can help me find a vendor, can help me create a strategy, but most people are only utilizing him to amplify. And they only do that because Bun ain't picking up the phone, like, unless there's a relationship there. And I think what most try to do is accelerate the earning, the friendship, the relationship that you need to have with people. I really wish we can spin the clock back and make everybody have a two-way pager now and have to go and actually beam someone your contact, so you actually had a rapport and a relationship with them. And so a lot of the relationships that we leverage at the agency started with I'm going to age myself, my Rolodex, right? But every hire that we've made, they're expected to contribute to the network of Team Epiphany and the reach. And that's the reason why I sit in every single job interview to this day.
Yeah, I mean, the ideal is it's not transactional, right? And in order for it not to be transactional, you actually have to have a real relationship. I want to encourage people to use the Q&A function because we want to make this interactive. We got a bunch of questions ahead of time, and then I want to spin into actually examples of this. But
those are the ones that's gonna stump me. Go ahead.
Well, one that we got that relates to what you're saying is culture shaped locally or nationally? Because I mean, you talked about this with Houston, and I think that's relevant to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think cultures are shaped
globally.
I think they start hyper locally. We can use a term, and I think when you really think about where trends come from, they're born out of necessity. They're born from communities who make good with what they have and make what they have the most beautiful, right? And so that's the reason why I really believe that most trends and cool things come from niche communities of color, and then it's then pirated and then explored and expanded. But the reality is, I think that it really starts from smaller communities who are tight knit, who really make the most out of every element, and that's where those trends actually come from.
Give me an example of that.
Year ago, 2 years ago, Virgil's writing on the bottom of sneakers, right? Like that's full DIY culture. That's full punk, right? And that's from small communities of people who would buy something, and to make it their own, they would embellish or graphically enhance a product. And so when you start looking at, the inspiration of kind of like Converse and kind of like where people are drawing on shoes, and now you look at Virgil, he's writing things on his soul, like all of that comes from those smaller communities and the artists who come from those worlds. So they're bringing him those insights and those cultural connectivity points, and he's taking them and then making them massive. But they still come from a very, very small niche community of people who are ahead of the curve. And so when you think that he's ahead of the curve, like the people that he's getting the insight from are ahead of the curve. So that's who we go to. By the time that it's in his hands, it's massive. And so for us, it's about the nucleus, the hub, and we got to be connected to the epicenter of where all this fly stuff is happening. Otherwise, we're just reporting the news, and we shouldn't be the agency that we say that we are.
Well, I mean, the marketing people probably know Virgil Abloh, I would hope, but they don't know
Yeah, no, I use the this is very Freudian, but I use the Kanye analogy often, right? Like Kanye is a musical genius. Hate him, love him, whatever it is, you can go back and listen to every record and it's popping, right? It's a classic, it's a hit. Like he's a musical genius. But you got to really look at where all of the other influences come from, right? His love of vintage comes from Chris Julian, who owns Fruition, which was a secondhand, clothing store in a strip mall in Vegas. You look at Sunday Service, that comes from Derek Watkins, Farnsworth Bentley, and his connectivity to church and being spiritual. When you think of his love of Deadstock, right? That's Deadstock Don C, right? That's his manager. Don is going on to create collaborations with Levi's and Mitchell and Ness and Jordan, right? And so when you start seeing, then there's a guy named Virgil Abloh, who was an architect that created, all of the visuals from Kanye's tours and right. So when you think about this whole network, right, of people, and there are others, right? What a squad, what a team. That team helped build who this man is. And so I always like to go back to all of those people, because to me, those are the real rocket scientists, cultural specialists, brilliant icons. Those are the people who I look up to. Those are the people that we look to for cultural direction. But is Derek gonna pick up the phone when you call him? You don't know him, but guess what? Me and D worked at the Polo store in Atlanta. Me and D went to Morehouse together. D was a bio major. D ran track, right? And so when you start thinking about like the sum of the people that you've met, that's how you can create, heat. But there are a lot of people in this game who kind of like miss those building blocks, and I'm not one of them.
So you used the word, I thought it was nice, pirate. The culture.
Pirate,
or appropriate or exploit. We could use
bootleg,
But let's talk about like examples of this in action, because I think there's a lot of, we could go to like, bad examples, but give us some examples of how a marketer can make this connection in a way that makes sense for their marketing goals. They're doing this stuff for money,
Yeah,
but
totally.
also makes sense for the communities that they're looking to connect with.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the biggest piece here is you got to really know your consumer. And I think you have to always market to their aspiration, right? I always have some corny like sports analogy, but it's like, if you're throwing a football to where the receiver was, that's an interception or a pick six the other way, right? You got to lead the receiver to a destination on the field, but you have to trust that person, know that person, and know where they're actually running to, right? And so that's the biggest thing for us is really just about aspirational marketing. I would say one good example is some of the Coca-Cola work that we've done. We won influencer experiential AOR for the launch of Coca-Cola Energy, and
we had this Coke Energy event back when we like.
Oh yeah. You guys, you're right.
Yeah,
and
it looks terrifying, but that's only because we're looking back because there's always people standing around without.
You got to think about it. That was launch events for 500 people that happened this year, right? And you quickly think how the world pivots. So it's poly experiential, poly discipline, multiple touch points, right? So when you're thinking about launch events, what are big scale events we can do in New York and LA, right? But then we know we have the Super Bowl TVC coming. And so how can we pair somebody with Martin Scorsese and Jonah Hill, but speaks to the youthful energy vibe of it? So we found YB and Corday. And that kind of like helped us kind of create similar energy through event experiences and then through TVC. Mm-hmm. And then we needed to kind of create the energy amongst the people who we know who push culture forward. And we decided to create kind of a collaboration, if you will, with Camp High, and Camp High, most people don't know until you get the product. I couldn't afford Camp High until we made this collaboration. So you should just get an idea of just the aspiration of that. But we also got consumers interested in the brand through third-party collaborations where we were able to create kimonos and sweat kits and, things like that. And then we were able to see them to some of the most influential people around the world. So Kehlani got one and she rocked it, or Teyana Taylor got one and she rocked it, and during quarantine in front of her Bentley, and then Dave Chappelle got one. So when you really just start thinking about, Lena Waithe got one, right? And so what you start doing is really touching people, allowing them to be introduced to the brand, and then not trying to dictate we don't want to dictate their reaction to the product. If they post, they post. If they don't, they don't. But what they do know now is that we are working with this brand. If you think of opportunities for us to interject this brand and culture based upon some of the things that you're actually doing, it's a great introduction, right? And that's ultimately what it was. And then there was the seeding program. Then there was the sampling programs, because big KPIs at Coca-Cola are kind of cans in hands and sampling opportunities, right? And so we had to pull all of these things together. And what happens is that the consumer sees the sexy stuff. They see the event with the 3D mapping with St. John and Corday and, all these different performers and Kenny Burns hosting. And then you'll see these seating packages go out and all these celebrities wearing it. And then, you're on the street and then you see. So all we're really talking about is to be visually aspirational, is to connect this brand in a compelling and emotional way to consumers. Mm-hmm. Everyone needs energy. We dictate when we need it, and this brand is there for you. And so when you say energy, keep the same energy in all these different terms, we had to really think about energy through all of these other channels. And we've effectively done it in one of the most trying marketing times ever, but it's because we dissected what the client needed and we figured different ways to get there. It wasn't the fact that, hey, we were going to make a sweatsuit and then thought we were going to sell a zillion cans of Coke Energy, right? Like, these are all small components, and it's very important when you press play on these elements and then how they interact and then how they overlap. It's so tough, man.
A lot of your work has involved experiential, and one of the and this is, it's very critical for brands, the experiential part. And one of the questions we got ahead of time were how you see experiential changing. One of the questions said, for example, corporate fan villages that used to happen at events like the Super Bowl or Comic-Con. Are you just like, well, for now that the experiential is not happening, at least in person experiencing, but does that come back?
Yeah, about 30%, 35, 40, some number around there, 30, 40%, over the last 2 years has been our income through creating experiences, and, 4 months ago, like I thought our lives were over. And to the contrary, some of the best work that we've done has happened now, um,
Yeah.
but I really think that like what we've been able to see and we've become really good at doing virtual things. So whether we're producing, Insecure Block Party, whether we're doing the Alvin Ailey Gala, we're starting to get our event team to be virtual. And what's going to happen is experiential is coming back. And when it comes back, its reach is going to be better and far greater because we are going to be able to morph what's happening digitally IRL. And then it's going to unlock so many really innovative, cool ways to connect with consumers that, I'm excited for 2021.
Yeah.
I don't want to
I mean, it's a totally different world, but like obviously, for us, like, our experiential were like industry events that, we took place obviously in person. And forcing it, I don't think we would have done as much. We definitely wouldn't have done as much of the virtual, because that was working.
Yeah.
So ideally, we come out of this and that comes back, and then we also have this virtual stuff, and then we can also amplify the stuff we do in person. That's the ideal. But talk about HBO Insecure. I mean, we have this book here, and the difference of doing, say, season 4 versus the previous ones, which seem like a lot more in person. People are staying close together in season 2.
So, a couple of things about HBO. They've been our client for 8 or 9 years. We are an extension of them. They're an extension of us. Those are our family. And, the first time that we got our hands on Insecure was 4 or 5 years ago, where, we produced a block party in Brooklyn, right? To kind of launch the show. And then our job went from just launching a show and getting eyeballs. It was then started shifting into how do we build the Insecure brand? Then season 2 came along, and we did a block party, in Inglewood, right? And then, season 3 came along, and then, we did a 4,500 person Insecure Fest block party at LAFC Stadium. Slides, 2 Chainz, huge performance, and then, what you really saw on the show, which was kind of, I don't know if that's ever happened before, is that the marketing influenced what happened on the show, where Issa was actually building a block party in her community. So the first 3 seasons, really talked to this block party. We're getting geared up for season 4. We're about to go do a block party in 3 or 4 different markets. The budget's in, the scope signed. We're ready to go. Talking to vendors, got our visual center. Then boom, the world that we knew blew up. We still had a show to launch, and we were the first to go. So there wasn't really any look to your left, look to your right, and see, the learnings from what other people have done. It was just like, we out here in the deep end and we tread in water, and now we need to swim to shore. And so what we quickly switched to was a virtual block party theme that literally became the blueprint to how you actually create virtual events through COVID, through this race revolution that we're having, and then probably through all of 2020. And ultimately what we did is just really thought of all the touch points that we have, that was a positive, things that we wouldn't have had if we were just IRL. And then we started to kind of like build on those things, right? So we created like, seating kits that help enhance your tune-in. Seasons prior, we had started a podcast that's now at like 3 million viewers. We use Twitter. Issa, logged on live while the show were going on. We had recaps of each show. We had a performance with Jadenia, right? And then it worked. And then we needed to close the season, and then so we kind of like brought that same philosophy back where, seating kits again. And then, Miguel performed. You'll see the slide here where we hit 3 million people on a podcast. Like, that's crazy for a brand to actually have earned, right?
No, I mean, you had to pivot, to change. I guess if we didn't have the coronavirus, like, do you think you wouldn't have come to this solution? So I'm just wondering, like, was it successful because people can't go outside, or they can go outside, but it's just not?
I think it was successful because people couldn't go outside. I think people at that particular point in time were really looking for content that they can kind of binge and get around and then create other narratives with their friends around it, right? So that 1 hour show can turn into 3 hours worth of personal conversation. And if we can have a part of that consumer's time focused on what we're creating for the brand, what an amazing piece. But I think the biggest thing is about pivoting, and you can only pivot when you know your goal and you know your consumer,
Yeah.
and that's what we had to do for our brands, and we had to actually do that for the agency. We had to stay visible, we had to pivot, we had to continue to put work into the world. So I think even for the first 2 to 6 weeks of quarantine, we didn't have much to do. I had a lot of bodies. I have a lot of people at the agency, and what we did is we refocused them on things that were important to us. So we created a digital zine called the Team Epiphany Times, where our entire strategy team penned everything. Our creative team laid it out, and then we reached out to our community of illustrators who then donated art. Check that out. They donated art. So the cost of doing the zine was zero because we wrote it. Our community helped illustrate it, and it's been getting incredible pickup. So unique stuff from Kehinde Wiley. I mean, not Kehinde Wiley, from Hebrew Brantley. Photography from Mel D. Cole. Joshua Vides did a cover. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And what you see here is just some of the pieces that we actually, created. It's been, published through our Instagram channel. There's been some support, but when you really think about it, that is one thing that while other agencies were like, hey, we're going to print some t-shirts, I was like, yeah, that's very like high school for us. Right. And it was very only a couple diverse people at your agency are now doing that. For us, this was a project that the entire agency can contribute to. And it was very important that we found that project, because what it did, it kept us really connected when we were disconnected.
Yeah.
It gave us an outlet to express what we were feeling. And so it had that release. And so the success of it has a sense of duality to it. It kept us visible. Our clients saw it. They saw what we're capable of, right? And they also, and for us internally, it just kept us together and it kept the morale right. And as you really think about quarantining, no one's house is big enough. I don't care where you're living, you can always use some extra space. And when you really think about all the kids that work at the agency, I call everybody kids, no disrespect. I'm 45, they're not. But, it gave them an opportunity to have a voice. And then it also gave them an opportunity to pair their work with some of, the artists that they revered the most. And so it's just been an incredible project. But then we've done, things. I did a podcast called Dad Work, where, I'm just talking to other dads about what quarantine life looks like, running a business, doing work, sleep training, you name it, being a teacher.
Well, you're like influencer children.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, yeah, they're pretty sharp kids, but like, I mean, Hebrew was on the show. Jeff Carvalho was on the show. You see Dre Hayes, who owns who owns Foundation Group. He's on the show, but Victor Cruz was on the show, and Kenny Burns, and like all these kind of really great people. But it was just, 60 minutes for me to just have conversations with guys that I would normally have a beer with that I couldn't. And then I felt like what we were going through can help others. And so we did that podcast. Or, some folk from our strategy team did, With Your Black Ads, right? And things like that. So we've With Your Black Ads is really smart. I just gotta be super honest. Janelle and her boy Bronzy does it, but it's just really just about, our take on, the state of marketing and advertising, and it's very Black. It's very, very Black. It's good.
Explain the insight around it.
Huh? Say that again?
Explain the insight around the With Your Black Ads.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, we see things differently. We see, campaigns through a historical lens, and we remember those things, right? We remember the first time we were included, in creative, right? Like, so, you see, when Spike was doing Jordan 3 and 4 and 5 ads, right? Like how impactful that was to my life. And so we can unpack things like that. And then even just current events, right? And just exploring how, how we see things differently. It's brilliant. And people should definitely check that out.
So you meant, obviously we're in a bunch of overlapping crises right now. There's the health crisis, economic crisis, and now a social crisis, like a race crisis, really.
Yeah.
Brutality crisis. And, this is the age of revolt. I always say, like, there's a ton of revolt going on, and a lot of marketers are scared. I was talking with a top marketer yesterday, and he was saying like that from the C-suite, like they are very, very concerned and really focused on that. And he was saying like genuinely that they need to do a far better job culturally, both internally and then externally.
Totally. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I
this,
mean, we see it, man. I mean, for the last 2 weeks, probably half of my calls every day are really about how are we helping our brand partners traverse this environment. You know, the first thing that we really tell them is like, we got to listen. You got to listen. Like, you got to wholeheartedly listen internally and externally. You have to listen to what your consumer is saying, and they will identify where you need to go and what you need to do and how you do it. It's just a matter, can you listen and can you decode and then activate what they're saying?
yeah.
Also, the other big challenge is internally. And so this whole sense of diversity thing keeps popping up.
Yeah. You were using quotes before, right?
Yeah, it's like diversity, right?
Yeah.
Like, diversity is rendered useless unless the diversity is inclusive, unless the diversity is active. And so what happens is, even if you're able to identify and bring the talent in to your company, the question is what type of ecosystem are they in that allows them and allows the employer to live up to their promise to actually get that said piece of talent. And so what happens at brands now, it's not just identifying and paying and bringing talent, it's about them actually changing their ecosystem to actually welcome and effectively integrate the expertise and the professionalism and the POV of these diverse people. And so that, to me, is the biggest challenge. But
you've actually benefited from this as a company to some degree, right? I mean, in that,
it's funny.
No, because like you're able to recruit and use talent. Your agency. I mean, you shared. I think we have the numbers here. The
look at that.
diversity and inclusion numbers are far different from most agencies. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I never look at these slides, so I'm looking at it now. I mean, this is because this is what makes the work good. If you want to be great, you need a lot of unique POVs weighing in on a particular topic. And so if you have too much overlap in terms of interests and passions and skill sets, the work becomes bland and the work becomes ineffective. And so the fact that we are diverse we weren't trying to be diverse. We were just trying to look like the world that we actually come from and live in. And so when you see numbers like, 65% women, 5 of our 7 VPs are women and a minority, right? Like, there's no other agency that can say that, right? But the reality is like, this is just how it happened because we're a talent agency. Every agency talks about what they do and their capabilities and what they're selling. Like, throw that out the window first. You can't do none of that unless you are incredibly talented, unless you've created an environment that keeps the talent and then allows the talent to do their thing, to explore, to be great, to fail up. And so, diversity is just, I would say, code word for a winning strategy. And so for agencies and brands that aren't diverse, they almost don't have a winning strategy. And so, we want to make sure that everybody has a voice, and then everyone is included. Like, I mean, I would tell you, like, our first piece of $1 million business, the concept came from an intern, right? So you got all these high-powered creative directors, these, I'm looking at the data, it says this. And then the idea actually came from somebody who wasn't as skilled, wasn't as touted, but he had the same opportunity at Team Epiphany that other people actually did have. And so, for us, best work.
Recruiting? What about finding? Because I think a lot of things are ad agencies typically look in the same places, right?
Yeah.
And then they say there's a pipeline problem.
Yeah, sure, bro.
We're using a lot of air quotes.
Yeah, sure, bro. Yeah, get a new headhunter, or actually don't get one and roll your sleeves up and go find talent. The best way to recruit talent is through the talent that you actually have. The only way that can work is if the talent that you have actually wants to be in the environment that they are in. And so that's our philosophy, like, but then there are times when you have to find specialists, right? And you have to find people that are skilled. There was a time when, there's a time in our history when there were, for my liking and for the agency's liking and probably for the work's liking, we just didn't have enough young Black men at the agency. Like, how does that happen with me, Morehouse dude, Brooklyn guy, like clearly Black guy? Like, why can't I find any brothers, right? And what I was really finding was that we needed to get to the talent earlier before they pick their career path. And so we created a scholarship in Morehouse in my father's name. And then, I wasn't the best student. So, the requirement was just a 2.5 GPA, right? And somebody in the business, major or flow to kind of like figure out their graduation and what their degree was going to say. But like the reality is we wanted to get to talent before they made, I'm going to be a banker. I'm going to go do this. Right? And so you got to get to it a little bit earlier. And what that really means is you got to roll your sleeves up and you got to find them. One of our young superstars, it was crazy. I'm going to blow him up and he's going to, get super embarrassed with this kid, Miles, who was on our team. He came, I think he was looking for a PR job. And then he was like, I'm looking for an account job. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, in no way in hell are you suited for those roles. And I'm just looking at you and your pedigree. Like, he went to Trinity. I forgot where he went to college, but he's super sharp. And we were like, you know what? You'd be perfect on our strategy team, right? Our strategy team, none of them are traditionally trained strategists. They're more culturalists. They're all published writers. And they know how to communicate. And the kid fit in perfectly. He's learning. He's probably been about a year and a half. And he's going to be great. And he's going to be great because we keep giving him things that challenge him and make him better. And so we're all connected to his success, and the opportunities that we give him to fail, to win, is building him into the next icon. And so next killer. And so what that has to happen is that you have to have a system at your agency that helps incubate talent, that understands that this is not like a sprint, that this is a marathon. And when you start thinking about, another stat is, I think average tenure of our employees are close to 6 years now.
Yeah.
And our client tenure is close to 6 years too. And so when you really think about consistency in this era of, promiscuity of, your head is on a swivel, right? That doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't
Well,
exist.
I think a lot of agencies, they blame they say, well, geez, we can't keep clients. Clients are disloyal and stuff like this. And then they don't make the connection that they can't keep employees because they keep turning over employees every 2 years. So of course you're going to turn over clients.
Yeah.
Clients are not hiring JWT, they're hiring the people and the talent.
Facts. And I think, while they're hiring the talent, I think, the one thing that the agency has to do, again, another sports analogy, it's like, like if you're running a football and you don't see the hole open up, like you can't get through the line of scrimmage, right? And so it's the agency's job to see the brand's challenge before the brand actually briefs you. If the brand is briefing you on their challenge before you got an answer to it, then you're not a good agency, right? And so what you've got to be able to do is also understand that their challenge changes, your approach needs to change, and the polydisciplined people that you have at the agency, sometimes you have to flow different people in and out of a brand because the brand challenge plays. And so what happens is agencies start doing square peg, circle hole, bang hard as hell, it'll fit, but at a particular point in time, like, you're going to have a migraine, right? And so what we like to do is just move things around. And unless you are lockstep with what your clients' needs are, you understand literally the passions of the people that work with you and for you, like you wind up, being one of those agencies, with, a tombstone real quick.
Yeah. So final thing is like, what is the impact, the long-term impact, right? We're in the throes of all of these crises, right? And like, I think what a lot of people don't know is what emerges from the other side, because I think sometimes when you're living through things, it can seem like, wow, we are living through some unprecedented thing. And then a lot of times things slide back to normal.
Right.
I'm on the sort of more, I like radicalized in my own time in the suburbs and think that things are going to vastly change. But what's your read on it? I mean, what are we going to come out of this? Are we going to come out of this with profound change, or are we going to come out of this and really snap back to the same stuff that we were doing right
Yeah,
before?
I think I think we're going to change, but I think before there's that change, and I think what kind of I've been focusing is kind of keeping me positive is just the fact that I think for the most part the humanity and the fact that we will care more about the people to our left and our right of us than we had prior. And I think, giving, you know, I just I don't want to say love is the way, right? But like the reality is like I think we're going to become a more loving culture, a more caring culture. And I think then that's going to then influence the things that we start seeing into our world, right? Like I think we're going to start seeing the ways in which brands can actually positively impact the lives of the people who purchase their products, right? And in order to do that, there needs to be a sense and an insight of really what's challenging our consumer. What can we do to help? Not all of them, but one of them, a few of them, most of them, right? And I think that that lasered approach is going to be able to, I think, uplift our culture, our communities, and then also create opportunity for those who didn't have the same prior.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm excited. I think I'm fortunate that I can be excited about what the future looks like. 4 months ago, I'm like day to day, like what are we doing, right? And now that I'm starting to see, the agency can function, and the mental health of my team is strong, and we're getting wins, and the clients that we got are just great people, right? Like that's really
Yeah.
what we want to do as an agency is create just great work streams and environments. But I think we work for people as much as we work for the brands that they work
Yeah.
for, and
So
is that.
on that, because this is a question came in from Sean McNulty. Thank you, Sean. That sort of touches on this. Have you ever had to tell a brand that comes to you, check in hand, no, either due to issues of the product they make or their business practices, or more worryingly, that you have no idea how to make them cool?
Yeah, we don't want that. Two, if I could tell somebody check in hand and they show up with a check, yeah, this hasn't happened in 15 years, man. I don't know where you working, but I would try it. No. Here's the deal. Like if we don't live the brand, if we don't are not a true consumer of that brand, it's not a product that we can actually work on or for. We like to try to find, great brands, but a term that I don't know if exists or is it a word, but an entrepreneur, right? Like we like to work
Yeah.
with entrepreneurs at brands. I'm an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is just basically somebody that's got the same DNA but understands how to work inside of a system. I never learned how to work inside of a system, so that's the reason why I have an agency. I don't know how many times I applied for a Nike job before I just was like, this is not going to work, and I guess I'm never going to be invited to Portland. But the reality is like I want to work with the same people who want to be innovative and want to push things forward on their brand side. They're some might feel that they are, some aren't, and they're very few. So the same way we vet opportunities is not just by, hey, I love that brand, but hey, can I work with this person to do the best work we possibly can? And it's the people that allow you to be great.
Yeah, that actually it calls to mind a question we got in advance, which was about approaching influencer marketing for a company with a niche product or focused on a niche community. Like, I mean, we saw the example of like Coke, and we've got one for Audi, but like, what about like if you're not looking to reach? I mean, these are Coke wants to reach every single person on the earth. So
Right, 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 right. No, I mean, there are a lot of sectors that we haven't really played in. I can just speak personally. A lot of times, I get opportunities that people want to talk to me about my sneaker collection, my watches, my glasses, and all those things, right? But I think as I used to be a cool influencer guy, right? Like, okay, I'm not. I'm dad, right? But my passions and my amount of research that made me cool in that space is now translated or deflected into another arena. Like I love being a dad, right? And so, you know, if no plug here, but like, hey, like I know more about like upper baby strollers, Britax, car seats, cool things to do with your kid on a weekend for $1 or $10, right? Um, I think again, it goes back to that secondary passion piece
Yeah.
and really looking at who the new consumer is of these products and identifying who's influencing that purchase, right? A lot of times people will be like, hey, like this is who's buying it, but not really. Like there're just certain things that I make decisions for in my household, not as many as my wife. But there's some things that I'm an expert about that allows us to market these products who've been marketing themselves for the same way since they've created the brand, right? It gives us a novel way to go about it, right? And so that's one of the things that we're really looking to do is really unlock the core passions of our team. We won a piece of Hendrix business, years ago. And the reason why we won it is that a woman that worked on it understood steampunk, who knew that their brand was built from that. And I wouldn't know that she loved steampunk unless, I knew her, what she was about, and what fueled her, right? And so I just think like if you take the time to not be big, not be massive, right? And grow, it's taken us 15 years to get here, right?
Yeah.
We haven't had an investor, right? Like we don't, like it's on our own. It's good old American horsepower. But the reality is when you build that way, I think you build it the right way. You build family and community first. And when you build those bonds with the people that you work with, the work is just better, it's deeper, it's more meaningful, it's passionate. And that translates into our shit is better. Like basically, and it's something that I just haven't seen many agencies do. And the ones that have gotten so focused on the bag that by taking the bag that they've destroyed their body of work. And that's the reason why most agencies peak and flow with, you know, 2 years of good work and then they swag surf on it, right? Like, but the reality is like 15 years at heat, and here we are. And, where tomorrow takes us, that's cool. But I think the way in which we created the agency, we're not a slave to the P&L, we're a slave to the work and we're a slave to our community.
Yeah. So final thing is you've been doing this for the agency for 14 years.
I used to have hair.
Yeah. What's been the hardest part of leading during this? Because this has been a unique experience for everyone, leading organizations made it all the more complicated now.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just be honest, right? It's been tough. I'm down, 19 pounds. I haven't been running. I haven't been eating the best. It's just the stress and the fact that, I'm working 18-hour, 19-hour days, right? Like that's the first piece, I think the other hard piece is I just love and care for like everyone that rocks at the agency, like they've dedicated their lives to it. Some have been at the shop since inception. A lot have been here, I mean, I think our whole senior staff has been here over 8 years, and just checking in on them, what we were really finding is that, as, the protests were ramping up, was that a lot of our kids were in the streets protesting, um, you know, um, and I had realized that ain't none of them been locked up before, right? Especially in New York, right? So, the one thing that we wanted to do is make sure that they were good, and we had a Zoom call with the entire agency. I listened a lot. My wife came up with the idea of, well, if they do get locked up, how can we help them, right? And so the idea is, how can you always help someone? It may not be the sexiest, it may not be, the biggest headline, but if it helps them, then that's what our job is to do. And what we did is, we work with, our legal team. We created an escrow fund, and literally, if anybody at the agency was peaceful protesting, I gave everybody my lawyer's cell phone number and my home phone number, and they can call me or him 24 hours a day if they got into any issues while peacefully protesting, right? That's what I'm doing for my squad. I love them, I care for them. And as you become bigger, it's very difficult for you to give everyone all. So I think that to me is one of the most frustrating things, but I try. And I also try to be as transparent as I possibly can, sometimes to a fault, because I just think while we're going through all of this change in our life, the one thing that we all want are concrete facts so we can pivot and we can move. And so while, you turn on the TV and, the people who are, governing this country, like their facts are not factual. The one thing that I can do to my squad is be transparent. If I'm scared, I'm scared. If I want to cry, I will cry. But I will be honest with them. And I believe, that honesty is welcomed.
Yes.
And that's my job, man. People do work to provide for their families. It's my job to love what they love as much as they love it.
Yeah, hear, hear. If there's one good thing about this time is that there is an increasingly low tolerance for bullshit on from
Yeah.
all levels.
Sometimes, like you gotta get screamed on too. But like
Yeah.
the reality is it's all love and it's all pushing us forward, man. But I'm blessed. Did I know that the decisions that I made before were going to be my blessings now? No, it just felt like the right thing. And my wife, who's my business partner and my best friend, will always keep me karmically on the right side of things. And even through this terrible time, we want people to know that, it's more than work at Team Epiphany. It's more than work. We fam. And whatever we can do to support them in the spans of running a business, we will. And you know, uh, I mean, we've had people who had babies this year, during COVID at the hospital. It's tough, but we work to provide for the things that we love. And I think if people really understand where those things fit into your life, you can't provide unless you work, right? But we like people to bring their whole self. We want you to bring, it's crazy. Like some people that even aren't at the agency, it's like when we were open, like they'll go work at another agency and they'll bring their mom and dad, when they come into town to Team Epiphany. I'm like, oh my God, like that to me is as important as the P&L.
Okay, Coltrane, thank you so much.
Thank you, yo.
Appreciate you being on, and thank you all for joining us this week. I'll be back next week with a new podcast. Going to be joined by Carell Cooper, Eric Recridian, and they're both hosts of the Minority Report, which is a podcast about the minority experience within our industry, and we're going to be highlighting some of the stories that probably don't get a lot of attention that they deserve. So please do join us for that. That is next week, again at noon. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. Thanks again, Coltrane. Bye.
Peace.